If you're a fan of the channel, by now you know that Resident Evil is literally my favorite franchise, and this is just another reason why Capcom did what EA couldn't, rejected making Resident Evil 9 an online game because fans didn't want it. Way to do what fans actually want, man. Yes, yes, I love to see it. YouTube has been kind of doing some weird stuff with my videos, been sending out to people who hate me, and I'm getting dislike bombed and hate comments galore. So like this video, comment on it, subscribe, man. Help me out a little bit. That's all you gotta do. It's just a couple of clicks. Let's get into it.
The duality of AAA game publishers. On one hand, you've got those who give in to misguided temptations when it comes to like turning franchises that are traditionally single player and trying to make them online multiplayer. And then you've got a AAA publisher who like tried that early on, but were very quickly like, no, this is not what the fans want. Let's not ruin this franchise. The former refers to Electronic Arts, a game publisher that has become very controversial because of their just incessant need to commit to live services. And despite knowing how unfavorable many of their practices are as far as...
Yeah, people like me, we're completely out. We don't play online games. I don't play online games at all because they're all garbage. I used to play the fuck out of online games, man, until every single one had a battle pass and a whole bunch of skins and a storefront. I hate it. I hate it so much. So I just don't. I just don't play them. I'm out on it. I don't play AAA games either.
Monetization is concerned.
Well, I play Capcom games now. Those are like the only new games I play. Or like every once in a while a game like Baldur's Gate 3 will come out.
They just double down on that stuff because they know people will pay, or enough people will engage with it, and they'll be able to extract as much money as possible.
Yep.
And then you've got something like
money.
Like Capcom. There's a company that's been on a roll with banger after banger when it comes to game releases. And Resident Evil has been a franchise that they've kind of revived in a really strong way.
I don't even think it actually really fell off. Well, Resident Evil 6 was... It might be the worst of the main series, but like, I still liked it. I'll still go back and play it. It's still got some groundbreaking mechanics.
With the remakes and with the new entries and the direction that they've taken Resident Evil. And today's story concerns Resident Evil 9 and how it contrasts the development of Age The Veilguard. So one thing that you may not know about Resident Evil 9 is that once upon a time it was going to be a very different game. Back in May of 2025, Aesthetic Gamer aka Dusk Golem, who is an industry insider who's got sources, who's leaked a lot of information about upcoming horror games, talked about how once upon a time Resident Evil 9 was going to be an open world game, an open world multiplayer game at that. Here's what he said. A lot of what he shared about an old scrap version of Resident Evil 9, referring to another source, the Native American Wendigo, he's called. So he kind of elaborated on what he shared. Resident Evil 9 originally started development back in 2017. The original version of Resident Evil 9 was trying to be the opposite of Resident Evil 7 because when Resident Evil 7 first launched, it actually underperformed. And so basically Capcom saw that Resident Evil 7...
Yeah, Resident Evil 7 underperformed because it was different and they got too big for their britches. And also, like, the launch was weird. People weren't really into it, but over time, people really liked it. It was, I think Ethan Winters was the main problem, and also the change to first person was a big problem. But they figured it out in the next game. Resident Evil Village, they put that third person camera in there. Man, I cannot play Resident Evil 8 in the first person, but third person camera is fucking awesome.
Was initially underperforming. They panicked and like, well, clearly we gotta like pivot and make this an open world multiplayer game.
Yeah, clearly that's what we have to do. People don't like the tight corridors and like single player experience. Dude, come on. Remember last time you tried to make it multiplayer? Everybody fucking hated it, and that was just co-op.
So the original version of RE9 was trying to be the opposite of RE7, i.e. big open world multiplayer game. RE9 originally starred Leon and Jill in a fictional island based off of Singapore. This is the old RE9. The project got a pretty heavy reboot in 2021 around the time Village came out. Now, this is all ultimately rumor and speculation, but Dusk Golem has been proven to be a pretty reliable source of leaks, and the information that he put out there was actually recently confirmed by the developers themselves, who admitted that early on, Resident Evil 9 was going to be an open world multiplayer game. So right here we have the creator's message.
I'm so glad that they went back on this. An open world Resident Evil game. Man, I do not want another open world game. I'm tired of it. Like, if it's a game that's supposed to be open world, fine. But stop making games that weren't originally open world games. It's retarded. Like, what do you do? You're chasing trends. You're trying to put everything in your game, and it's bloating it.
#1 video from the Resident Evil portal, and skipping to a certain section, we've got the following information that they shared. Hell yes, as it should be.
要素を詰め込むってことは、できたと思いますし、実際我々もこのタイトルのごく初期では、いろんなシステムの検討というのを行ったんですけれども、
よく噂されてますけど、オンラインのバイオハザードですとか、オープンワールド、
They straight up acknowledged the rumors
そういったところを
and the leaks. And there it is, there's footage of this. They actually were very upfront, which I appreciate.
Dude, I love it. Man, Capcom just keeps doing things that I like. They do things that I don't like, and they're like, okay, people didn't like that. All right, we're gonna listen and not do that anymore. That's been the recent Capcom, and I fucking love it, man. I fucking love it. I hope that movie's gonna be good.
Yes. Thank you. Can you imagine a world where Resident Evil 9 turned out to be an online multiplayer game, especially in a landscape where people are kind of getting tired, especially when single player or traditionally single player developers or traditionally single player franchises?
Yeah, an online multiplayer game, that makes me think skin packs, microtransactions, battle pass, all of that, and I'm just out on it. I would have been completely out on it, and I'm glad they sensed that from actual fans of the Resident Evil series, and they weren't trying to grab the wider audience, a modern audience.
Try to pursue this route that doesn't necessarily fit the IP in the way that people like really love it. It's like one thing for it to be a spin-off, but to me,
yeah, that was the reason people didn't like Resident Evil 7. Was because it didn't really, it felt like a Resident Evil game kinda, but it was so different from anything we'd ever gotten. I think it was a precursor to what we have today of like Resident Evil. I probably wouldn't go back and play Resident Evil 7 like just on my own. I'd do it for content. Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil 2 remake, 3 remake, it's all right. 4 remake, oh yeah. Oh yeah. And anything that's coming after, oh man, I'm on board. Totally, until they screw up a few times. They're gonna have to screw up a few times for me to be off of Resident Evil.
Make a mainline Resident Evil entry, an online open world multiplayer game. It's just something that never was going to go well. It was going to be a live service main entry for Resident Evil, which is not what people want at all. The temptation was there, but they assessed the situation. They stopped themselves in their tracks. Resident Evil 7 eventually did sell well enough where it gave them some confidence that this was the right direction for Resident Evil. And they went, let's scrap this altogether. This is not what the fans want. Let's give Resident Evil fans what they would actually look forward to.
Dude, yes. That gave me chills when he said that. Yes, that's what I want to hear. Let's do what the fans actually want instead of what we think we want to make the most money. And this is how you make money, bro. This is actually how you make money, is do what people want. Because, yeah, you can make a game that makes a shitload of money, breaks records, and it's garbage, but, like, it's breaking records, man. Eventually, people are going to be off it. There's a reason why Resident Evil is still around, and why people still buy it in droves, and why there's still such a heavy fan base.
Single player, offline, horror experience, survival horror experience.
Like, you don't hear people talking shit about Resident Evil like you hear people talking about Battlefield and Call of Duty and Assassin's Creed. No.
With all of the markings that make a Resident Evil game, including the absurd moments. And this is a pivot that I appreciate, and it's seemingly a pivot that happened smoothly enough where they could actually, like, start from scratch, is what they said, to create Resident Evil 9 Requiem. And I bring this up because it's in stark contrast to what Electronic Arts did with Dragon Age. Dragon Age The Veilguard in particular. This is a game that many will know initially started as a single-player game, but then...
Yeah, that game, like, bro, way to kill your franchise, man, before it even really gets going.
And EA demanded that it be turned into a live service. It's why veteran creative heads of the Dragon Age series left around that time. They just didn't believe in that direction for the game. And so for a while, Dragon Age The Veilguard was actually developed as a multiplayer online live service experience. But eventually, EA did make the pivot to bring it back to what it was originally supposed to be, single player.
Yep. Let's make our game single player. Oh, no, we're not going to make enough money. Let's make it multiplayer. Oh, shit, nothing's working. Oh, we're too far into this. Let's just make what we got right here a single player experience, bro. And you can tell. You could really see it. And they were like, oh, well, you know what we need? We need some money from these identity politics corporations. So let's put identity politics in our game. Oh, you don't like identity politics? You're a bigot! And then nobody played it. Congratulations, you played yourself.
But the difference here is that Dragon Age went too far in that route as a multiplayer game, and EA didn't give the team enough time to build this game from scratch. So they had to take components of this multiplayer game that they were building and adapt it into a single player experience. It's why the tone is lighter. That tone was...
Are you going to bring up how it was like woke garbage? Probably not. He probably doesn't want to create that divide in his community.
Was more meant for a live service experience that was meant to have more mass appeal. It's why the combat is the way it is. It's why the gameplay and the structure of the game and the game design just doesn't quite align with something like, you know, Dragon Age Origins and past Dragon Age entries. It's because it inherited a lot of the multiplayer stuff that kind of ended up crippling the single player experience. And, you know, it ended up having to adapt elements that you wouldn't associate with Dragon Age. And that's why a lot of people felt like, while Dragon Age The Veilguard, it's a miracle that it shipped in a polished state and as a cohesive game at all. People felt like it just didn't quite feel like the Dragon Age we know and love. And it's because...
What are you talking about, dude? Didn't quite feel like the Dragon Age that we know and love. Like, what are you talking about? It was nothing like it, and it was gay as fuck.
Because it had to inherit...
Like, you know it, too. Like, quit being a pussy, man. I fucking hate when all these content creators, they're trying to protect their money, I guess. Their reputation. But their reputation just is they're huge pussies whenever they don't bring up this stuff.
A lot of the, you know, once multiplayer project to be able to be finished within the time frame that EA restricted them to. But with Resident Evil 9 Requiem...
By the way, it doesn't have a whole bunch of shit identity politics in it. Also, main character's a woman. Somehow, they didn't put identity politics in it. Well, that we've seen so far. But from what I've seen from past Resident Evil games, there's not going to be any identity politics. It's not going to be woke. It's just going to be fucking normal.
They experimented with multiplayer. At first, it started as a multiplayer project because it was this like knee-jerk reaction to Resident Evil 7 not selling as well initially. And then again, it had this long tail. But initially, there was the thought process of what if we just go live service with Resident Evil 9 essentially. And that would have just ruined not only the reputation of Resident Evil and Capcom, or at least like done significant damage to it.
Again, that would have done significant damage. Again, I remember Resident Evil 5 and 6. By the way, Resident Evil 5 is my second favorite Resident Evil game, but I can acknowledge that, like, what the fuck were they doing with that one, man?
It would have, I think, been woefully detrimental to Resident Evil 9 as an entry, as a mainline entry to the series. And so the fact that Capcom and the folks and the leadership gave the go-ahead to scrap that, like there could have been the temptation to just force them to continue this project and to make it multiplayer and to make it heavily monetized, which, you know, that's what online multiplayer games do these days. It would have been a monetized live service. I have little doubt about that. But the fact that they actually decided to pivot and say, this is not it, Chief. This is not what the fans want. And we need to build this project from scratch and make it the experience that it should be at launch. And it, you know, it's not going to inherit aspects of that multiplayer game. Like, I'm sure, I don't know, there might be some assets that they inherited and whatnot, but it would seem as though they were given enough time, especially with Village acting as like a stopgap before 9, to really make this single player Resident Evil 9 from the ground up, and not having to be restricted by having to inherit aspects of the online multiplayer game. And they were able to make...
I think you're missing a few games. The remakes that were in between. Was 2 before Resident Evil 8? What was it? Or did 2 come after Resident Evil 8? And then they were like, oh, people really like the third person mechanics. Let's implement that into 8. Because 8 didn't launch with third person. It was a first person game.
An experience that feels like it was tailor-made to be an offline single-player game. And this is emphasized in the creator's message. Like, they make it a point to highlight that it's a single-player offline game. They really want to emphasize that. And so yeah, people online are basically expressing that Resident Evil fans dodged a bullet, or rather Capcom dodged a bullet.
Yeah, because it would have ruined it, man. One more bad Resident Evil game, people would have been out on it. I think Resident Evil 10, they'd be like, this is the 10th one. The last few Resident Evil games weren't very good. I'm not talking about Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was fucking amazing. Resident Evil 3 was kind of a disappointment. Also, Resident Evil Resistance, and that other one that was a multiplayer game. Like, it was getting to the point where over half of all the Resident Evil games ever made were bad. And you don't want to make more bad ones.
By not making it an online game. Capcom is on such a roll right now.
Yeah, did you not see what happened? Oh, they did see what happened with their other online games, didn't they? And that's what caused it. They were like, well, people don't want to play online Resident Evil games. What are we doing here?
Now, with Resident Evil in particular, and for them to ruin that by kind of giving into the temptation of going in the most generic route possible you could go with this IP.
Yeah, and it probably would have made it less scary. Because they want to get a wider audience, and the wider audience doesn't like scary games.
Instead of like really reinforcing and committing to the identity of Resident Evil and what makes it special and what fans love about it. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that to say that they dodged a bullet is an understatement. I think they dodged a missile here. And with Resident Evil 9 not being a live service, they don't have to maintain servers. They don't have to rely on recurrent monetization. They can just rely on this game being a good-ass product that they just put out into the world. It can just be a basic...
Yeah, and I don't even mind if it's a little bit open. Like Resident Evil Village was, like Resident Evil 4. I kind of don't want a game like Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6 anymore, where it's just very linear. You got the chapters, you go through the missions. Like, it'd be fine if it was like that, but I do like the backtracking. I like the backtracking quite a bit in the Resident Evil games, like in Resident Evil 4. The backtracking in Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2, like, it was pretty much open. It just wasn't open world. It was just, like, open areas. You can go back to places, and you have to go back to places to unlock other places, to go through other places to unlock other places. I like that. I like that kind of Resident Evil 2 style. I hope we kind of get back to that a little bit.
Transaction between company and customer, and with what they've shown so far and the amount of hype that Requiem has received, I have little doubt that it'll go on to sell really well, and that this will be a much more financially sound product, and this will be much more commercially successful, and it will make the money in a way that I think a live service version of this would have flopped and would have cost them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of manpower, and a lot of goodwill. So yeah, I applaud Capcom for having the sense to pivot when they needed to, when that temptation set in, to go the route that every other game publisher is going at, because they all want a piece of the pie of this oversaturated market in the hopes that they win the lottery of being able to turn a live service game into $1 billion franchise or whatever like that. That is not the route to go.
Yeah, we don't want that. Man, we don't want companies making all the money in the world, because it shitifies everything, because that's what everybody's doing. We want people who are passionate about making good games, making games. And fuck the money. Even if you lose money, make something smaller next time. Like, it's not that hard, man. Not that hard to figure it out. Like, it's hard to make games, yeah, but it's not that hard to figure out what people will actually be willing to play. And if it's going to cost you $300 million and nobody plays it, then why would you make it? Spend $20 million and have less people play it. It's fine. It'll be all right.
Especially with an established IP that isn't that at all. EA, I mean, what they did with Dragon Age The Veilguard, the way they handle that project, the way they try to make it a live service multiplayer game, and then the constant shifts in the direction of that project, and then not giving developers enough time to be able to make a true single player Dragon Age from scratch, where they could not be restricted by old design choices because of what this project was originally going to be, a live service that makes no sense for Dragon Age, an IP that is just not that at all. Like, how much that fucked them. Like, that is just such an opposite story to Resident Evil 9 here. Where
but you got to bring up the identity politics that was in Dragon Age The Veilguard, because that was people's major complaint with that. Even people who didn't play Dragon Age games were like, hey, this is fucking bullshit.
Pivot happened early enough, and where developers were given enough time to just make a Resident Evil game, not a live service with a Resident Evil coat of paint. In the same way that EA should have done with Dragon Age The Veilguard, a proper single-player Dragon Age game, instead of something that ultimately was an amalgam of design choices in the past that didn't quite mesh with what the identity of Dragon Age is.
He said identity, but he did not say identity politics. Absolute pussy. This is why I stopped watching YongYea, because his takes were just milquetoast.
Or at the very least, this is one man's take on this news that Resident Evil 9 was once supposed to be an online multiplayer open world game.
Like, how do you bring up Dragon Age The Veilguard and not talk about how fucking preachy it was and how retarded it was?
And that the creators, actually, the developers came out and admitted it, and like actually were very upfront and honest about that development cycle, and how they felt like, you know, ultimately the fans and what they want needs to be a priority for an IP that has a very specific identity. I just appreciate that their candor about all this and the decisions that they ultimately made. But that's my take. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews.
Yeah, I don't think he went hard enough on Dragon Age, but really it was a Resident Evil video. But if you're going to bring up comparisons like that, you got to bring up the fact that it was riddled with nonsense, man. Nonsense politics. And then what the developers were saying around it, they were attacking people who were fans of Dragon Age and were saying, well, if you don't like this one, then you weren't a true fan anyway, you know, that kind of garbage. Like, use something else as a different example, man. Because, like, if you're not going to bring up all that, there's no point in even talking about it. Anyway, I can't wait for Resident Evil 9. I can't wait for the next remakes. I can't wait for the movie. Resident Evil, still solid franchise. Hit the like button, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for all the notifications. I'll see you on the next one.